Welcome all, welcome all. My name is Anthony and I'm hosting the midweek markets brief. Welcome to FP Markets. As mentioned in a previous episode, the whole point of these briefs is to quite simply touch on news around the world. How does it affect the markets? What can we expect? And what do things really mean? So let's jump straight into it and thank you for attending. Please feel free to leave comments in the comment section, any questions or any topics that you would like to be covered. And also for all of our traders out there, you do have access, even to the non-traders, you do have access to our Traders Hub with articles via the website. So this is a great place, just like our YouTube channel, that you can get some fundamental analysis, technical analysis. We have videos, webinars, tutorials, everything you need in one place. Hence why it's called the Traders Hub. So please feel free to jump on this and use it. There's some great material here. Now, in regards to the news, things are heating up across the world, across the board. There's a lot of negative news in the world. And unfortunately, we are in an industry as traders where negativity sells. People trade off of negative news. People would like to trade off of positive news, but it seems very hard to come by nowadays. So we have to go with what people are talking about. We can't really think outside the box too much because that increases risk. So for risk management purposes, you kind of do have to follow the crowd and what people are talking about and what the news is covering. So the first thing, just a brief update. We know who is going to be running for the presidential elections in November. I think we've seen it for months now who is likely to do it, but we've got actual official confirmation they've both got the amount of votes internally they needed. We have Donald Trump and our friend Joe Biden. Regardless of your opinions, these are the two that are going to go head to head, although there is still speculation that come May, June, that Biden may step down and somebody else may take his place. It could be Kamala Harris. Some are saying Michelle Obama could be coming back. Hillary Clinton. There's so many different rumors going around. We don't trade rumors. Rumors do have an effect on the market sometimes, especially nowadays with social media playing a big part. But in general, we wait for facts before trading, black and white information. The black and white information here is Joe Biden and Donald Trump are going head to head again. Donald Trump is still the favorite now, despite recent attempts to prosecute him. Last week, it was decided by the Supreme Court that Colorado's decision to remove him from being able to run in that particular state was overthrown, and has actually shown major weakness in the American democratic system. Why? Because if one state can turn around and just decide internally not to allow a presidential candidate, regardless of his history or background, if he's followed the rules and he's legitimately a candidate, then the Supreme Court have to get involved. It's not very good structure, so that needs an investigation as well. So at the moment, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going head to head in November. This won't necessarily have a major effect on the US dollar or US dollar related currencies at the moment, or US dollar related pairs, but it's an ongoing situation and will definitely ramp up in terms of activity and volatility in the market, especially a month or two leading up to November. So this is the situation with the elections. If we actually have a look at opinion polls, we will be able to see nice and clearly that in general, Trump is gaining across. We see a few down, a few in favor of Biden or Hawley as well, sorry. But generally, we can see that Trump is gaining in most of the territories that are listed on here. In terms of other news out of the UK, they've now officially announced as of today, Wednesday, that there is growth in the economy. Now, take it with a pinch of salt. It sounds like a great headline, but in truth, the same way that recession is measured, which is 3 consecutive negative GDPs, growth is too. So when you have 3 consecutive positive GDPs, then you can consider it growth. We're kind of at that stage in the UK and other countries, but they're still not going to cut interest rates. Why? Because just like America and Canada, Britain want to sit back and see a bit more data regarding inflation. But what we can pick apart right now is wages are rising less, employment is increasing, benefit claims are increasing. Yes, there's growth economically through various factors such as retail sectors, service providing, manufacturing, things like this, but we won't see implications of things like employment rates, unemployment rates, and cost of living until usually a month or two down the line. In this case, we can see that the rate of unemployment tipped slightly to 3.9 in January, when it had been forecast by economists to remain at 3.8. We again, I'll put this on a t-shirt, but we say take it with a pinch of salt, and the reason being is because a lot of people get hired over the holiday period on temporary basis, so it's quite normal that unemployment might go up slightly January, February time. Not drastically, it's just something to keep an eye on. So yes, we're hearing words mentioned as in terms of growth, but the forthcoming months will actually show real growth or not. And if this was just a misleading headline for clicks, or if it is actually something that is going to have an effect on the British pound in the long term. So if we actually go here, you actually see this was announced via Sky News. Growth returned in the UK economy in January, according to official figures, rose by 0.2. It was minus 0.1 before. So it is a nice step in the right direction, but it's too early for everyone to start partying and say that we're out of a recession. Things are getting back to normal. There is a long way to go. Cost of living, especially, inflation, especially. It has got to the point where people genuinely cannot save, let alone pay their bills. And this is something we can all relate to. So, watch this space. Let's see how it goes. We're always going to get misleading headlines because usually if they announce a recession one day, unemployment next day, then on the third day they might say, but it's okay. We've got an increase in GDP or growth. Okay, again, let's just see how it goes. I'm sure everyone has heard, and if you have not, you must have been living under a rock. Gold hit an all-time high. Yes, it was fascinating to watch. Is it surprising? Not really. With the way the world is at the moment, gold is a fear factor. It's an indicator of general panic. For thousands of years, people have always gone to gold. Why? Because it holds value. If currencies were to collapse overnight, Visa, MasterCard, everything was to collapse overnight, there is still one asset, precious metals in general, that will hold value. Now, I'm not saying all these people are buying onto gold as a CFD because they're actually getting it in their pocket. They're trading on the theory behind it, which is absolute, makes sense. But what we can see here is gold increasing. I've been asked several times, what's the limit gold's going to get to? There's no answer for that. We're in rather unprecedented times with what's going on in the world. Yes, we've faced the fears of conflict before, disease, famine, things like this, but not to the scale where social media, the internet has played such a big part in terms of propaganda, in terms of misleading information, and in terms of speed of information. Now, what I would say in terms of gold is the sky is the limit. It depends on outside factors. If we get a ceasefire in the Gaza situation, that will drop down gold. If we get a ceasefire in the Ukraine situation or the Yemen situation, then that is likely to drop down gold. But then if things are expected to get worse in any of those regions, it's likely to push up gold. So at the moment, until we get further news, I think gold is likely to fall into supply and demand territory. We go back to technical basis on this. We look at supply and resistance levels, and take it from there. What we can do, though, is to keep up to date with the news, and that is something that I cannot stress enough. Quickly touch before I go on to a very interesting topic, which I just gave you a sneak peek thereof, is the conflict situation. So right now on the screen, I've got the Ukraine map. A lot going on. It's a bit grim reading. I understand that. We try not to be biased in any way. We just want to look for the facts of what is going on, and depending on sources too. So I've used this live UA map for quite a few years now. It's very good to understand what's happening exactly in particular regions. So, for example, in Ukraine right now, in a nutshell, Russia's on an offensive, which was expected. We're in springtime. This is how military actions work. But what we have seen overnight is around 200 to 300 partisans slash rebels slash separatists Russians who live in Ukraine or on the border regions with Ukraine who have actually progressed into the Belgorod region. There was anywhere up to 60 drones overnight sent into Ukraine. 54 of them were shot down. There has been a intelligence headquarters, security headquarters in Belgorod that was hit by a drone overnight. So we're seeing a lot of retaliation, let's say. This is interesting because a lot of people would say, why is this happening right now? Because most of Ukraine's efforts are going to be focused on the Luhansk region to make sure Russia cannot progress westwards anymore. I think the reason is quite simply that this is election year. We know that Putin is likely to win it for various controversial reasons. And we're not trying to be anti-Putin or anti-Russia in any of this. We're just trying to state the facts of what's going on. But because it is election year, I think probably what these partisans, let's call them, or separatists, are trying to do is trying to expose weakness in Russia's security to make people try and vote alternative or not vote at all for Putin. Probably not going to really work, but it does expose it to the rest of the world, especially to Europe. In retaliation, or I would say in retaliation, although I think it was announced not too long actually before all of this happened, is two key regions in the area. We've got Transnistria here, which is eastern Moldova. It's a kind of independent region within the country, which is more Russian aligned, not internationally recognized. It is still part of Moldova. However, they have officially called out for help from Russia, the Russian mainland, for security in the area as tensions increase. Now, this is strange because it goes against Moldova's general policy as a country, which has always been to not align itself to NATO or Russia or any outside influences, that all decisions will be conducted within Moldovan territory and legislation. So the fact that you have a section of the country that is actually going against the rest and going directly to Russia, asking them for assistance and troop support, is quite alarming. Putin has also announced that to the north by St. Petersburg and northwards, that he will be stationing troops along the Finnish border here and to the Finnish border to the north here, but mostly concentrated around there. This is seen as a provocative move. Not really. I think this was expected, and if anything, this was expected to happen perhaps a year ago before winter kicked in. And why? Well, because Finland officially joined NATO and so have Sweden. So quite naturally, as NATO and Russia are not best friends, it is understandable that he is to station troops along the border for their security. Again, some may consider this an escalation, FX gold, we keep an eye. But we also remember when we're talking about Ukraine specifically, that it's very important also to look at things like wheat and soybean oil and things like that in general, because it's the breadbasket of Europe. The majority of agriculture comes from Ukraine, massive exporters of wheat. And because of this war, those have been affected. And I will go over it in a future meeting specifically about commodities and why sometimes people overlook them. And I think a lot of it is just due to habit that people traditionally trade currencies, precious metals, oil, and they forget that wheat, soya beans, these things are tradable too. If we go to the Israel situation, again, it's not a nice thing to talk about, but it is affecting the markets. We have no choice. There is no ceasefire. I didn't expect there to be a ceasefire, not leading up to Ramadan. I think this is more of a symbolic thing from the Israeli side to try and point out their superiority in the situation military-wise. So yeah, it's caused a lot of division, this whole topic, and I think you'd have to be a fool to necessarily choose a particular side. When it comes to trading, we need to just look at the facts, and the facts coming out is we can see that a humanitarian corridor, maritime corridor, is and has been set up from Larnaca in Cyprus to Gaza. The first ship, a Spanish-backed ship, has already deposited and delivered its first aid package. It went successfully. However, it's not enough for the amount of people there. It's a drop in the ocean, but the effort's in the right direction in that sense. There is no mention of a ceasefire at the moment. I think as Ramadan continues, we might see some more escalation on Israel's part, but that is again purely speculation. We're especially seeing it in the north of the country going into Lebanese territory, and the Golan Heights, which is circled blue here, which is a very contested region. So it is likely to spread here. The fact that it's Ramadan, Israel could use this potentially as a way of getting a message out to assert their position. However, they are receiving pressure from the West, especially America, to basically calm down their operations. We will not get into if they should or shouldn't. At the end of the day, I think the one thing that people can agree on is that they would rather have peace, that people don't have to die. And it would be nice if they can get down at a table and do a ceasefire. But that's a whole new topic, of course. So we touch on to the Red Sea situation, in this case, Yemen. One interesting development, which only military news is confirming here, and not general news, and I can only assume that is because the vast majority of people who read the news are not necessarily traders or look into things as deeply as we do. So it's more for the general public. But the Red Sea situation has developed a little bit. There's more attacks happening, more ships are being hit. We've already had 3 sailors die and a few have been injured. It's now not just Israeli ships, it's British ships, it's Danish ships, it's Australian. It's basically anyone going through is a free target. Now, the development in this region started off here with drones attacking ship in Maine. But over the past 4 or 5 days, we've seen a significant development into this area of the Red Sea. Why is this important? Well, how are they being attacked? Because the Houthis control northwest Yemen, and the original government control Aden, which is the new Yemenese capital, or temporary capital, if you want to put it that way. So there's no way that these Houthi rebels can be conducting strikes upon shipping containers from this coastline when it is controlled by the government. So it means one of 2 things. Either they're infiltrating this territory and conducting their strikes. It's very possible. It's not unrealistic, although it draws a massive concern to the security in the capital city of Yemen, the Yemenis government, and the fact that they're being backed by the Saudis with all that money. It doesn't look good. Or it means that one of their neighboring countries, in the African coast here, like Somalia, for example, or Djibouti. I'm not saying they are, but it could be a case of we're seeing a further proxy war, and we're seeing Houthi rebels perhaps operating out of these territories as well, possibly and very realistically within Somalia, because they have a piracy problem too. So it is very possible that this conflict is spreading and sucking in other countries into this vortex. Let's move more on to the market-related news for the week. The macros are economic events. Not bad this week. Again, a lot of focus on the US dollar. It's just the way it is at the moment. And you'll get some weeks where there's more focus on the euro and, Japanese yen, Australian dollar. But this week, mostly US dollar. We can see CPI came out of Germany as expected. Core CPI out of the United States yesterday came out slightly better than expected, and it did push up the dollar a few pips, nothing significant, but it did have an effect. I pay attention to that because it's really good to know, because during the virus situation a few years ago, people were trading more based on technicals and less about fundamentals, and understandably so, especially when it came to economic data like this on the screen. But as times have progressed, it seems we're getting back to normal. People are paying more attention to this. So I cannot stress enough, for risk management purposes, to check your economic calendar and to just see the events that are going on. And in this case, we've got CPI coming out of the United States. That came out yesterday. We've got GDP came out of Britain today, hence why I talked about growth. We got initial jobless claims and PPI and retail sales out tomorrow as well. In terms of business news, somebody may have mentioned to you about Boeing and Boeing shares and stocks. This is an interesting one. Now, we don't trade as conspiracy theorists, but there's no harm in being a conspiracy theorist, because you can use that interest, that intrigue, to help predict future movements. Instead, use it as a risk management tool. Don't trade off of theories and speculation, but like I said, help you predict future movements to then trade the corrections after, perhaps. In this situation, if I look at the stock market now, there's a lot of talk about airlines. So we go with airlines. We don't try to be cheeky and think outside the box, but we look at the airlines. Why? Well, quite simply, Boeing had a whistleblower in the past, only a few months ago. He worked for the company over 30 years, and his name was John Barnett, and he was found dead in a hotel car park in his car. Why is this significant? Well, he came forward as a whistleblower. He was let go from Boeing after 30 years of service. After those 30 years of service, he went to the FAA, which is the airline body that governs the United States, North America in general, and said that Boeing had safety concerns that needed investigating. He was right. It was investigated, taken seriously, and then Boeing had to testify, and fix their wrongdoings. Now, Boeing blame it on individual airlines to keep up the maintenance. It's an ongoing thing, but it wasn't good for Boeing in general. But what was really not good for Boeing in general was the fact that this guy, John, at the end of last week started testifying, providing evidence, and then over the weekend mysteriously died in a car park with a self-inflicted wound in the hotel car park in his own car, when apparently everything was fine with him at the end of last week. I think anyone can read between the lines of what I'm trying to say could have happened, but we can't say, okay, let's go and sell or buy their shares accordingly because of a conspiracy theory. No, we can't. We can't. But what we can do, and if I bring it up right here, bear with me. Boeing. And let's have a look at Boeing shares together. Boeing, if you go on a 5-day, here's the interesting part. Boeing on the 11th of March dropped. This was when the testimony was happening. But at the same time, people were going into a sell. When the news came out that he had died, it then also went into another dip down. A lot of this movement was happening before this news even came out, which raises the question, did somebody know? Was there, insider news, let's say? Anyone says that's controversial or a conspiracy, this has been proven before, and we heard it before with GameStop. GameStop was struggling as a company, their value was going down, and the banks, the big traders, wanted to finish it off and bring the price down, bring it on the verge of bankruptcy before buying again and making a huge profit at the expense of a legitimate company's loss. But the people found out about this. Reddit traders, they went online, they did the complete opposite at the same time, and they bought, and it pushed the price up, and it cost the banks and the professional traders billions and billions of dollars. So yes, conspiracy does have some relation. When people suspect something strange is going to happen, we can sometimes see it in the market, and we can see it here. We can see that before the weekend it dropped. Why did it drop? Well, he was testifying. But to be honest, that was happening a few days before and it didn't drop. Then the weekend hit, his death was announced, that dropped it. But what was this drop? Why was it? Perhaps people knew this was likely to happen, or people that worked, like I said, close to Boeing, politicians, whoever it may be. Again, this is speculation, but you can find this information online. A lot of people saying the same thing. This has brought attention to the airline business in general. Spirit Aerosystems have suffered. Why? Because they're responsible for the maintenance of aircrafts in the United States. They're like the middle ground between the manufacturers and the actual airlines themselves. So the airlines being Delta Airlines, American Airlines, Alaska Airlines. The manufacturer is Airbus, Boeing, for example. And in the middle, you have Spirit Aerosystems. Now, it was proven that it was the responsibility for a lot of these faults with the Boeing aircraft, and Alaska Airlines had some issues with their aircraft. It was the responsibility of this company. Therefore, their share price has gone down over the past, let's say, the past 3-4 days. We can see with other airlines, Alaska Airlines has done the complete opposite. Why? Because they have proven that the mistakes on their aircraft, as you can see here, Boeing, not Spirit, misinstalled piece that blew off Alaska, there's a lot of blaming going on. But if we actually look at Alaska Air Group, their share price has gone up. So whilst Boeing has suffered, whilst Spirit has suffered, the airlines are still gaining because they have addressed their problems in the past and they fixed them and they've been given the all clear by the FAA. So the point being is right now, do not try to be too cheeky and think outside the box. Where the crowd goes, if everyone's talking about Boeing and airlines, then go and have a look at Boeing and airlines, because next week they could be talking about pharmaceutical companies or Disney or Tesla, McDonald's, and food related companies. There's always something different that would be brought to the headline to try to go with the crowd. As time goes on and you get more familiar with the markets and earning seasons and how certain news can bring a share price up or down, then you can start to think more outside the box. But to wrap it up, that's all it is for the week. Keep an eye on the conflict situation, keep an eye on gold, keep an eye even on cryptos. Consider the safe haven. Bitcoin is reaching an all-time possible all-time high as we speak. Now is a good time to start looking across the board, diversify, spread the risk out. It's called the Sharpe ratio. We can talk about this more in future sessions. Any questions, drop them in the comment section below. Please subscribe, like the video. It is much appreciated. And I hope you all have a wonderful week. Do not hesitate to contact us or your relevant account manager, and we'll be more than happy to assist you. Thank you very much.